of us watching from abroad, from afar, it looks as if these protests, these strikes, these mass demonstrations came out of nowhere, but of course that is not the case. So it's very important for us to evaluate the context of what is happening, as well as to celebrate the already remarkable achievements of progressives, workers, trade unionists, and ordinary people in Belarus who are just united around their struggle against an undemocratic regime. So we will try and cover all of those questions today. What is happening in Belarus and why is it happening now? What are the politics and the composition of this newly found movement against Lukashenko? What are the origins and the demands? As many of us watching and participating in this discussion are activists and trade unionists ourselves, we are interested to know how the movement is organizing and what are its prospects for success, of course, the latest developments, but also how can we offer the most heartfelt, but as well as effective solidarity. What forms could that take? What can we do as citizens, as activists, as trade unionists, and as people united in solidarity with the people of Belarus fighting for democracy? We are joined by an incredible panel. I'm very happy to be here with Lizaveta Merliak, who's the International Secretary of the Belarusian Independent Trade Union of Miners and Chemical Workers. We also have Pavel Katarzheusky from the Central Committee of Just World, which is the Belarusian section of the European Left Party. We are also joined by Valentina Katorzevska, member of the Homo organization of the Free Trade Union of Metal Workers, and Denis Pilash from Socialny Ruch, the social movement in Ukraine. So I'm not going to take up much more of our precious time today. Our speakers are going to address us with opening statements and remarks for about 10 minutes. And then we will have time for your questions and comments. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat section. Feel free to post any notes, any comments, any impressions that you have based on what our speakers are saying, and I'll do my best to keep on top of your questions if they come on the chat. But once we open for discussion, I will also be able to see your hands raised, and then we'll take your questions. So without further ado, we're going to start and hear from Lizaveta first. Thank you very much for joining us, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alena. Dear brothers and sisters, I welcome you in this session. I'm very happy to be with you. And it's really a break for me to be here and talk to other people than to think of what is going on at the factory where we have this strike committee in Grodno. So I'm Lizaveta Merliak. I work for the Belarusian Independent Trade Union of Miners, Chemical Workers, Oil Refiners, energy, transport, construction, and other workers. I will talk on behalf of this union. This union was about 6,000 members before the election. Now the union is growing, of course, but I can't tell you the numbers because we don't follow all the events, and there's no time for counting, actually. But I can assure you that the movement is growing. Straight after 9th of August, when we had elections of the president in Belarus, which were neither fair nor transparent, the state started incredible violence against peaceful protesters, those people who wanted to protect their vote, those people who knew for sure that neither them nor their neighbors, nor their co-workers voted for Lukashenko, but voted for another candidate, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Those violent arrests that happened the first night after the elections and which continued on the 10th and 11th of August, all those terrible events with detention of over 7,000 people, facts that several people were even murdered, and no access to internet. All those things made people gather together and start to think how to go through. Translation. Yulia?
Hi, are we doing in Russian? Извините, вы хотите, я на русский, чтобы перевела, или как?
А вы не будете переводить?
Не, ну если вы по-английски, то тогда не надо переводить.
А, вы думали с русского на английский переводить? Извиняюсь. Okay, then I will go on. Sorry, I didn't understand.
Whatever is most convenient for you, Lisa, don't worry. Whatever
Okay.
you're more comfortable
I just
with.
thought that I would need to stop every several sentences and translate.
Oh no, if it's more comfortable for you to speak in Russian and for me to translate, then we will do it.
Well, no, I'm fine with English, I think.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So when workers understood that there is a clear evidence that nobody voted for Lukashenko, and the results, the pre-results that the Central Election Committee was given, kind of 80% voted for Lukashenko according to this committee, and about 6% for Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, which sounded not true, even close to truth. So, and all this violence that happened around peaceful citizens of Belarus, it all made workers of several big enterprises address the employer. The employer, who is also representative of the state. I will tell you some facts from the enterprises that my union is presented in. One of those enterprises is situated in Grodno, where I live. It is called Grodno Azot. It's a huge state-owned enterprise producing ammonia, fertilizers of nitrogen, many chemical things. So this enterprise is state-owned. So workers of the enterprise addressed the employer, who is also representative of the state, saying that this violence should stop. The employer was involved in kind of a dialogue with workers and promised that the violence against the workers of his enterprise would stop. And he guaranteed that he would talk to the police and the city authorities and that all the workers who were arrested would be released because the work of the enterprise is supposed to go on, and those workers are substantial workers who have knowledge of how the enterprise works, and it's a chemical enterprise which is better not to be stopped because of the chemical processes and different things. So the workers demanded that not only the workers of the enterprise, but everyone is released from prisons. It was the first demand. Then the second demand was to stop the violence, to release the arrested, and investigate and punish those who were involved in the arrests, in arresting people. But the main demand, which started to be put forward from the workers, was to overthrow Lukashenko. The workers at first meetings with the employer organized some kind of a spontaneous vote. That was a very spectacular thing, actually. They were asked to raise their hands if they voted for Lukashenko. And it was only one or two people, including the main managers of the enterprise, raising their hands. And when they were asked to raise their hands, if they, in case they voted for Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, everyone was raising hands. So this again made them understand, the workers understand that they are not alone and that their choice was supported by the majority. So as I said, the violence stopped. Many of those who were arrested were released. And in Grodno, for example, the city administration made some promises to the citizens that since August 12th, let's say, I don't remember the date exactly because during these 2 weeks many things happened. There were the main squares in the city were for peaceful protesters, like those who want to state their position could go to the main square and have a big organized meeting, for example. So what we saw in Grodno, many workers and other citizens and representatives of political parties and NGOs joined mass protests. They all held slogans saying that we didn't vote for him, we didn't choose him, we didn't elect him, stop violence, punish those who were involved in arresting and beating up the people. All those thousands of citizens were in the streets every day for 1 week. At the same time, workers at biggest enterprises started to organize strike committees. In Belarus, we are not supposed to have strikes on political matters. Like all the law written about strike prevents workers from strike actually, because the laws were written by the dictatorship actually, and all the rules are done by the dictatorship to prevent its people to fight. So according to law on strike, a trade union, for example, can't put forward political demands. It's only for collective bargaining on wages or on health and safety issues, and such issues as overthrow of dictatorship are political demands, and only workers' collectives can put forward such demands by constitution. So in Grodno, at Grodno Azot, workers started to form strike committees on democratic base. Like in each shop floor, they had meetings, and they voted for those who they trusted the most. And thus, from the collective of 6,000 workers, we have a strike committee formed by 108 workers. They elected 5 co-chairs of the strike committee, not 1, but 5, not to be beheaded, kind of, so that the strike goes on no matter what happens to one of its leaders, kind of. So the strike committee had several meetings so far, and on each meeting they are kind of coming close to discussion of how exactly to strike, but it is hard to start the strike as the employer has taken initiative from the workers to make the strike kind of legal. The employer wants us to vote for strike. And to start a strike, the employer says that we need to have 2/3 of the votes. And the enterprise is huge, 6,000 workers who work in 4 shifts, like day, night. It's very hard to collect all the balloting. It's hard to count. It's hard to get through all this paper thing. And actually, in the end, we wouldn't even. I'm not sure that we would get the 2/3 result because we can't hear everyone's voice. Actually, we can't organize the vote the way we want that because the employer doesn't let those who have day off, for example, who are on vacation, they are not allowed to enter the enterprise. So the employer asked us to organize the vote and then prevents us from making this vote. Until now, I can tell you that from what we have already, workers vote for strike. It looks like for the whole week we're discussing that tomorrow we will strike, tomorrow we will stop, tomorrow we will stop financing the dictatorship. And people in the city, they're expecting us, the biggest enterprise, the most important one, the most dangerous one, they expect the workers of this enterprise to strike and to put the beginning of this bigger thing. And workers are losing their patience already because we want our enterprise to work. We want to get money from it. We want this money to go to the citizens, kind of, but we don't want to finance the dictatorship. So when we say that we are going on strike, many people imagine that a strike means a full stoppage of an enterprise. Workers of the enterprise have sometimes different thoughts about what is more effective, because if our final aim is to stop financing dictatorship, then maybe we could make a cleverer strike than just stoppage of a huge chemical plant. So all these discussions, they are kind of not letting us start together, and we lack coordination, I think. We lack coordination, which could have been done by a national strike committee. Like there are strike committees at a huge enterprise, also chemical, mining, joint stock company Belarusian, which is 100% state-owned. There is a strike committee there. There's a strike committee at Naftan in Novopolotsk. It's a huge oil refinery on the north of the country. We have coordination kind of between these, among these enterprises, but what about Minsk, Minsk factories, Maz, in Zhodina Bilaz, in Zhlobin, in Babruisk? Like there are many places where strikes also go on or are about to go on to start. We don't have coordination with all of those. It's also making us kind of isolated. And when recently members of the strike committee started to disappear in Soligorsk, in this Belarus Kali, one of our leaders disappeared or had to disappear because he was followed by we don't know who, but someone from Secret Service or whatever. It looks like we are on the stage when the state is preventing us from forming a national committee, a national coordination center. And we can't be coordinated by the national what is it called, council formed with intelligentsia, poets, musicians, ex-politicians, and so on. Even if we, I mean, there is one person there who is representing independent trade union movement. It is Alexander Yarashuk, the chairperson of Belarusian Congress of Democratic Trade Unions. It's the trade union center that my union is part of, and the independent trade union of metal workers is also part of it. Valentina is from this union, and maybe she will also talk about what metal workers are facing at the moment. But I should say that workers want to stop financing the dictatorship and thus helping the whole society of Belarus to have a powerful leverage over this dictatorship. And we are prevented from forming something bigger, right? But we can't be coordinated by someone who is far away from the trade union movement, kind of. That's what I wanted to say. Maybe I'm a bit, let's say, messed up, but you should understand that we don't have days off. We don't have time to talk to your family members. We don't have time for anything. I don't read news about the world. I just read news about my city, my plant. I'm in close contact with workers at the enterprise. And it's one of the first times that I'm talking to someone from another world, actually.
We really appreciate it, Lisa, and don't worry. I mean, we can't imagine, but we sympathize with how exhausted you must be. And also, I think you actually described brilliantly the struggles to get something going and some coordination, at least on some level, when this has been a challenging environment. I particularly found it very interesting how you were talking about essentially the attempt of management to delegitimize the strike by asking for it to go through legitimate means and applying all these legalistic restrictions on what is obviously a very spontaneous but also a very widespread position of the workers. We're definitely going to talk a bit more about this later on, but thank you, Lisa. There's a few questions for you that we're going to address later on. I'm now going to turn to Pavel. Pavel is, as I mentioned at the beginning, part of the Central Committee of Just World, which is the Belarusian section of the European Left Party. So he'll give us a more of an overarching perspective on this, I believe. Thank you, Pavel, for joining us.
Thank you, dear comrades, for possibility to talk today. I'm very happy that we have so much participants, and also I'm very happy to welcome comrades from our sister party, Left Unity in Great Britain. Maybe I will need translation them, but now I will try to explain what is going on in the country. Before start of electoral campaign, mostly political scientists and analytics were talking about silent campaign, the campaign without activity, with disappointed people who will not take part in protest actions. But when campaign was started, we saw big meetings in support of independent candidates, and it was clear that the problem is not only fair elections. Of course, fair elections too, but the problem was quality of life, destroying of social guarantees, and so on and so on. Of course, after rigging of elections of 9th of August, it was clearly understandable that Lukashenko just trying to show his power, trying to show that all political activity have no result, and that it is impossible to change something. But after that, we can saw very big potential of self-organization among Belarusian among workers, and I think it is first time since 90s when we can see the strikes, action of workers at the factories, because before at previous elections it was possible to see only protests in big cities, but now we can see the protests in towns, in small cities, in our regions. Well, and it is really impressive, but to be honest, I am not very optimistic about the prospects of the protests, about the future of the protests, because as we can see after last week's, after last week, protests not so large, it's continue, but I think people tired after last Sunday, after the big meeting of freedom in Minsk. Well, of course, we will see how it will go tomorrow, because tomorrow will take place a meeting for New Belarus. But as I can see, workers scared a bit. Of course, because secret services, police try to stop strikes. They, as Lisa mentioned, they arresting worker activists, union activists from the striking committees, from independent unions, and so on. And of course, they continue to arrest activists of opposition. And I'm not very optimistic. I think that we missed a moment when people were ready to win, were ready to change something on last weekends. But as I see now, the conflict became a silent conflict. I think in the nearest weeks, maybe nearest months or nearest year, it will continue, but Julia, I'm sorry, maybe I need translation.
Хорошо. Давайте тогда пару предложений по-русски и будем переводить на английский.
Да, конечно. Я хочу сказать о том, что конфликт, наверное, перейдет в затяжную стадию и в том или ином виде будет продолжаться не так массово.
I want to say that the conflict, in my view, will turn into some sort of prolonged but not as volatile a fashion. So it will. So the conflicts will continue, but they will not be as acute.
Я также боюсь, что власть в ближайшее время может развязать репрессии, но они будут идти очень долго, но не такими вспышками, потому как я очень сомневаюсь в том, что они забудут имена тех, кто так или иначе деанонимизировал себя.
I also think that those in power will continue with repressions for a prolonged period of time. And those repressions will continue for a long time, but they will be less evident, less in the public eye. And I also think that the regime is unlikely to forget or drop out of their sight the names of those activists who have de-anonymized themselves, whose names are now noticed by those in power.
Также я хотел бы отметить, что существует проблема для левых сил сейчас в том, что, с одной стороны, мы вынуждены бороться с авторитарным режимом Лукашенко и пытаться каким-то образом продвигать свою повестку в массах. но в то же время мы должны оппонировать с тем, кто также говорит о замене Лукашенко, но не говорит о социальной альтернативе, а говорит о том, что режим Лукашенко недостаточно антисоциален.
The left now, as I see, also are facing quite a lot of the problems. So on the one hand, we need to fight the authoritarian regime of Lukashenko, while also try to push for our own left social agenda into the masses, socially orientated agenda. And at the same time, we need to oppose those who also want to displace Lukashenko, but who do not have the socially orientated agenda. Вы имеете в виду социалистический или социальный?
Я говорю о либералах, которые, собственно, тоже против Лукашенко, но они его считают недостаточно антисоциальным.
Yes, so I just wanted to clarify whether we meant socialist or social. So what Pavel is saying is that specifically the left needs to fight those liberals who are not focused on fixing social problems, but they're just interested in they just want to remove Lukashenko. That's it. They just have the general liberal agenda.
Мы уже сегодня видим, что капитал находится в панике, и я скажу честно, что сам я голосовал за Светлану Тихановскую как за технического кандидата протеста. Но мы уже сегодня видим, что Тихановская и Объединенный штаб, они, собственно, сами напуганы тем, что происходит, и уже готовы говорить о каких-то компромиссах с властью, о каком-то диалоге, и мы не можем быть уверены в том, что эти люди хотят реальных перемен, не только демократических, но и социальных.
We can already see that the capital is panicking. I myself have voted for Tikhanovskaya, who is the technical protest candidate. But we already can see that these candidates and political forces associated with them are scared. They're talking about some sort of dialogue and compromise. We therefore are not sure whether whether they want or ever wanted to have any positive social change in the country, or whether there was something else.
Я также с сожалением должен отметить, что наша партия «Справедливый мир» была одной из немногих левых сил, по крайней мере радикальных левых, кто принял участие в протестах, кто поддержал народные протесты, так как очень много левых организаций, которые в большинстве своем являются сталинистскими, они осудили эти протесты и считают, что сейчас не нужны ни демократические права и свободы, ни свободные выборы, и те левые, которые сейчас протестуют, это вообще не левые. Такова позиция многих, в том числе и сталинистских организаций в Беларуси.
Sadly, I have to say that our party, Справедливый мир, or Fair World, Just World, was one of the left, or more so radical left organizations that supported the protests as they were developing. Many other left organizations, specifically Stalinist organizations, in fact, have condemned the protests. They were saying that now is not the time for any kind of protest, be it left or be it liberal protest, any sort of anti-Lukashenko protests, that it's not the time to talk about some democratic rights or freedoms and the need for them, and that actually the left that they joined the protest, according to these Stalinist organizations, is not the left at all, because they're supporting the wrong cause.
Также я хотел бы отметить, что я совершенно не представляю, как возможно бороться за социальные или социалистические перемены в Беларуси, при этом не говоря о политической демократии. Вопрос здесь идет только о неолиберализме, который совмещен с диктатурой, или том же неолиберализме, который совмещен хотя бы с условной политической демократией. И мы прекрасно осознаем, что левые сейчас борются всего лишь за небольшое окно возможностей. И я сомневаюсь, что это окно возможностей растянется надолго.
I also have to say that I cannot imagine how one can fight for establishment of social or socialist order or social order and changes without political democracy. So for Pavel's organization, political democracy is paramount as a left agenda, because we're not only fighting this neoliberalism plus dictatorship. This is something more. And what the left now in Belarus is fighting, Pavel is saying, is this small window of opportunity, however small it is, and they know that it will be it will be something that will last, that will take a while to use as an opportunity, but yet it is an opportunity.
К сожалению, к большому сожалению, многие левые защитники режима говорят, что если мы получим политическую демократию, то мы также получим и ужасы экономического неолиберализма. Но в то же время эти люди отказываются замечать, что сам Лукашенко проводит неолиберальную политику. Он поднял пенсионный возраст, он уничтожил социальные гарантии для студентов, пенсионеров и ликвидаторов на аварии на Чернобыльской АЭС, он ввел систему краткосрочных трудовых контрактов. Он также еще в 90-х уничтожил Верховный Совет, где главной оппозиционной фракцией была фракция коммунистической оппозиции.
Спасибо. Повторите последнее, пожалуйста.
Я хочу сказать, что когда левые защитники режима говорят
Нет,
о том,
вот эти именно что он убрал. У нас пенсионный возраст, студенты.
Он уничтожил льготы для пенсионеров, студентов и ликвидаторов на Чернобыльской АЭС. Значит, благодаря Лукашенко был поднят пенсионный возраст, была введена вот эта рабская контрактная система найма. И еще в 90-х он уничтожил демократически избранный парламент с левой оппозицией.
Okay. Regrettably, what Pavel is saying is that these Stalinist left organizations are saying that together with political democracy, if this is what we're going to get, what we will also get inevitably is all the horrors of political neoliberalism and the policies of neoliberalism. What they fail to acknowledge is that Lukashenko himself is implementing a lot of those neoliberal reforms. He is the implementer of them. So some of those reforms are the increase in pension age, the abolition of the privileges and grants for students who are children or from the families of those who were involved in the liquidation of the aftermath of Chernobyl catastrophe. This was something that was very common in the post-Soviet space. So in Ukraine, for example, that exists, that students get privileged access to education. Lukashenko abolished that. He also transformed the labor legislation and introduced casualization of labor, so short-term contracts that Pavel refers to as servitude in over form. And also what he has done is introduced a parliamentary reform that effectively has destroyed the left opposition that existed in the parliament.
Да, я хотел бы добавить, что несмотря на то, что сегодня протесты утихли, это еще не факт, что они закончились. В течение данной избирательной кампании Протесты приостанавливались 4 раза, и каждый раз многие не ждали, что они продолжатся.
I want to add that despite the protests now have quieted down a little bit, it doesn't mean that the fight is over or that there won't be any more protests. During the electoral campaign, there were waves of protests that tapered down on 4 separate occasions, yet there was still a build-up and continuation after.
Конечно, в случае продолжения протестов, я считаю, что левым, конечно, надо продолжать бороться за восстановление социальных гарантий. На данный момент одно из главных требований нашей партии – это сокращение рабочего дня без сокращения заработной платы. Но мы в том числе должны бороться и за права человека, потому как мы все видели жестокость последних дней со стороны полиции. Я и сам провел в тюрьме 4 дня. И, конечно, нам надо пытаться защитить тех, кто все эти дни и последние месяцы стоял на передовой борьбы за демократические права.
Right. Nevertheless, I think that the protest will continue. I think that the left must continue to fight for various social guarantees. One of the things that we have now on our agenda that we fight for is a shorter working day without decrease in the pay for that same work. So less, shorter hours, same pay. We also need to continue to fight for human rights. Because we have seen the increase in police brutality and violation of those rights, so it's important to enshrine them. So Pavel himself has spent 4 days in prisons, for example, so he has felt it on his own skin. There are many people who are still already in jail, a lot of protesters who are imprisoned and who are being hounded, and we need to protect those people. And we need to fight to free them, and we need to fight for protection of democratic rights.
И я хотел бы, ну, наверное, завершить свое выступление тем, и добавить, что левые на сегодняшний день, даже если Лукашенко уйдет, должны быть готовы, чтобы встать в оппозицию к уже новой власти, потому как я очень сомневаюсь в том, что те, кто придут к власти после Лукашенко, будут в состоянии в полной мере реализовать те социальные и демократические требования, о которых они сами же говорили.
I want to conclude with this and add that the left, nevertheless, needs to continue fighting and hold their position because regardless of whether Lukashenko goes, and even if he goes, the left needs to be able to put themselves in a position to new people who will take the position of power, because we can see that the people who are likely to come into power after Lukashenko are not very likely to carry out those social and economic promises that on which they have gone into the electoral campaign and which they promised to the masses.
Спасибо, Юлия, спасибо, уважаемые товарищи. И да, если необходимо позвать Валентину, я это могу сейчас сделать.
Пожалуйста. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, comrades. And if we need to call Valentina now, we can do that now. So I suppose that's the inquiry to the organizer about Valentina.
Thank you very much, Pavel, and all of your contributions are much appreciated and also have sparked quite a lot of discussion on the chat function. And I think we will explore some of those questions about this not formal but difficult kind of coalition in demands between the workers, those who want the more social agenda put forward, and the more kind of liberal voices that just want to topple the regime, and what the different plans for what happens afterwards are. But yes, If we can now turn to Valentina. I don't know how you're gonna call her, or yep. Valentina
is she in the same space with him?
Yes, I think that's what Pavel explained earlier.
The word he used indicated that he could kind of call her in.
Valentina is a representative of the Free Trade Union of Metal Workers. So she's again going to give us a slightly different perspective of what's going on the ground, and hopefully we'll pick up on some of the points that Lisa was raising earlier as well, about how the organization is going, but also I think something that we keep seeing appear from the participants and from the audience. People are really keen to express solidarity. People are really keen to voice their support for the demands, not just in terms of achieving the fall of the regime, because that is, as Pavel said, a prerequisite. Need genuine democracy, working rights and human rights for people. I'm not really sure where Valentina is, though. So
I think she's on his screen.
Ah, there she is. Hello, Valentina. Thank you for joining us.
Добрый день.
Yeah, feel free to speak in Russian or English as you prefer. We have Yulia here, who is happy to translate, and she just did a brilliant job with Pavel as well. So over to you.
Валентина, как вам удобнее, по-русски или по-английски?
На русском.
Хорошо, давайте.
Спасибо.
Давайте так, пару предложений я перевожу и потом опять. Да.
Меня слышно, да?
Да.
Я представляю профсоюз, свободный профсоюз металлистов Гомель. Наш профсоюз, к сожалению, к большому сожалению, подключился в рабочие протесты совсем недавно, но вместе с тем активно и сейчас занимается тем, что активно агитирует членов профсоюза, которые состояли в государственном профсоюзе, вступать в независимые, поскольку государственные профсоюзы, как показала практика, абсолютно не защищают интересы рабочих.
Спасибо. Hi everybody. I'm a member of the Free Trade Union of Metallurgy Workers from Gomel. Sadly, our union has joined the industrial protest quite recently, but we're a very active member of it, and we're currently also agitate other workers and members to join the independent trade unions, because they are the ones who have demonstrated that they can actually protect the rights of the workers, to the contrary of the state around trade unions who collude with those in power.
На сегодняшний день, насколько мне известно, бастует 55 предприятий в Беларуси.
As far as I'm aware, currently 55 enterprises are on strike.
Все усложняется тем, что члены стачечных комитетов сейчас активно прессуются властью, им предъявляются обвинения, их просто забирают в милицию, арестовывают, и поэтому вот на вчерашний день было 6 задержанных.
The situation is complicated by the fact that strike committees are being pressured in various ways by security forces. They're being detained, they're being arrested, they're being persecuted, and just yesterday there were 6 detentions.
Некоторые из них выехали за границу.
Some of them have left the country. They moved abroad to avoid this pressure.
То есть идут угрозы, идут запугивания, и людей пытаются таким образом лишить глав, обезглавить этот протест.
Yeah, so there are a lot of threats, a lot of intimidation towards people involved in organizing of the strike, and in this manner, the attempts have been made to decapitate the vanguard of the protest movement.
Наше заявление о том, что мы присоединяемся к этому протесту, уже дает свои результаты, и люди звонят и с заявлениями о том, что они вышли из провластных профсоюзов и готовы вступить в наш.
Our announcement, or our union's announcement that we have joined the protest has already been yielding results. We keep getting calls from various members that they support the strike and informing us that they have already joined the independent trade union.
Таким образом, борьба продолжается. К тому же Светлана Тихановская вчера заявила о том, что протесты нужно расширять и продолжать дальше.
So in such a fashion, the protest and the fight goes on. And yesterday also the opposition, the opposition candidate Tikhanovskaya made an announcement that the protest needs to go on and the fight shall continue.
Не знаю даже, что еще вам рассказать.
Я не знаю, что-то про динамику в профсоюзе, возможно, вашем. Как вообще себя ведут члены? Члены перекидываются на протест полностью?
Конечно, мы в рамках своих городов, областей, мы активно участвуем в этих протестах. Тем более, что люди звонят, мы их переадресовываем к нашим кураторам по областям и городам. Мы выходим на площади. Вот я лично руковожу Гомельской организацией. У нас тут есть небольшие проблемы по одному из предприятий, которое называется Гомсельмаш. Проблема
как
в чем?
Называется еще раз?
Гомсельмаш.
Гомсельмаш.
Да, машиностроитель.
Гомсельмаш.
Да, он... Проблема в чем? Проблема в том, что рабочие просто закрываются в цехах и им не дают выходить бастовать, не дают им как бы организовать стачку.
Их закрывают в цехах. Окей.
Да.
Давайте договорите, это я переведу.
То есть мы работаем с людьми. Что-то еще хотела сказать и забыла.
Вы подумайте, я пока переведу.
Да, хорошо.
Yeah, sorry, like we just had a little chat because Valentina was wondering where to go on with this. So I asked her a question about like what's the dynamic in their own trade union with their members, you know, how it goes on. So she said that they actively, because they're spread across a number of cities and regions in Belarus, and they work through their local and regional branches. They organize people to go on squares, organize demonstrations. So there is a lot of kind of leadership in kind of coordinated country, all national level. She also said that they are having a problem with one of their enterprises, which is she's based in Gomels, in Gomel Selmash enterprise. And one of the problems they're having there is that the workers who are trying to go during the working day, enjoying the protest, they've been locked inside the factory floors. They've been locked in there and prevented from going and joining their protest in the streets.
Люди боятся. На вчерашний вечер было заявлено о том, что готовится увольнение 8 рабочих Гомсельмаша.
8,
вместе с тем, да, 8. Но вместе с тем в поддержку правительства митинг проходил, было очень много людей, но которые абсолютно не имели никакого отношения к заводу.
She said that Valentina says that a lot of workers are being intimidated, of course, and they're being threatened with loss of jobs. So just in the last few days, 8 people were threatened with being made redundant. But she says that nevertheless, people still join the protest. They go into the streets, and a lot of the demonstrations that are organized by her trade union, it also is being joined by people unassociated with the enterprises. So there is this solidarity that's being shown with the strikers of the enterprise.
Can I ask Valentina a question? Can I ask?
Valentina, хотела вам задать вопрос.
Yeah, I wanted to know about your experience of, as what you just mentioned, about people who are not associated necessarily with the union, or people from other sectors joining you. What's the relationship between the industrial workers and perhaps public services workers, for example, healthcare workers or education workers? Are they joining in with you guys? Do you have any coordination on a kind of cross-union level?
Значит, спрашивает вас Алена насчет вашего опыта вот именно с людьми, которые приходят на демонстрации, которые не есть членами вашего профсоюза. То есть кто это люди, каким они образом туда попадают, какие с ними отношения. И еще она интересуется, как обстоит ситуация в плане координации демонстраций, протестов, допустим, индустриальных работников вашего предприятия и работников муниципальных предприятий, допустим, водопроводов, мусоросборки, газопроводов, вот такого дела.
Сразу замечу, что моя работа состоит исключительно работа соцсети и акций прямого действия. Я немножечко сейчас, у меня связаны руки маленьким ребенком, чтобы в полной мере включиться в работу профсоюза с координациями и всем остальным.
Okay, Valentina wanted to clarify that she currently is involved purely, like her responsibility in organizing the protest is in the remit of social media and direct action coordination, because her own situation is that she has a very small child, which means that this is how she is involved in the protest. Yeah, that's that. I think. А скажите, пожалуйста, вы по платформам координируете что-то с этих индустриальных работников, допустим, муниципальных работников? То есть разные профсоюзы как-то между собой координируются? У нас один из спикеров сказал, Павел, по-моему, говорил, кстати, что из-за этих запугиваний сложно координировать работу разных профсоюзов, потому что каждый за себя борется и все такое.
У нас, собственно, 4 независимых профсоюза, которые входят в конфедерацию профсоюзов. Да, они между собой, мы координируем свои действия, сотрудничаем очень активно.
Right, so I asked kind of a follow-up question of Valentina about whether there is some coordination through the social media networks through which she does her activism and contribution amongst these industrial workers and social sector workers and the rest of it. And she's replied that there are 4 independent trade unions in the Confederation of Trade Unions, and they actually amongst themselves, they coordinate actions and they do support it. They do coordinated protest and demonstration action. Shall we do an additional question, or shall we move to somebody else and then do questions together? How would you prefer? Shall I ask for a concluding word from Valentina?
Yes, if she wants to do a final, Valentina, if you want to say some final remarks for now, because there are some questions that we'll address once Denis has spoken as well. And it will be more of a conversation then.
Okay. Валентина, значит, просит, если спрашивают, хотите ли вы какое-нибудь заключительное пока что временное слово сказать, потому что есть много вопросов, которые потом они вместе собирают в группу и будут задавать уже всем спикером.
Ну, заключительная. Я, честно говоря, не очень была немножечко занята, не могла слышать, о чем говорили другие спикеры, поэтому хотелось бы сказать, подчеркнуть то, что мы не поддерживаем. Во-первых, Лукашенко, который создал в стране, наверное, настолько либерального трудового законодательства нет ни в одной стране мира с этими рабочими контрактами в 1 год, которые можно не продлить, которые... То есть в этом катастрофическом состоянии заводов и фабрик, стабильность которых это мыльный пузырь, которые в основном банкроты. Вот по Гомельской области были данные, что всего лишь 2 завода у нас, которые не банкроты. И то Гомсельмаш, он уже практически. Вот. Вместе с тем мы не поддерживаем неолибералов, которые приходят на их место. Мы отстаиваем сугубо права рабочих и социальной повесткой мы идем к ним.
Спасибо, Валентина. Удачи вам. Спасибо. So Valentina would like to sum up with this sort of a statement to say that she and her trade union, they do not support Lukashenko in any sense because in her understanding, the the labor code of Belarus, the rules on which workers are being employed, especially these short-term contracts, in her perception, this is one of the most liberalized servitude type of legislation that there is in the world. She says that she and her organization, they condemn the catastrophic state of industry and industrial enterprises in Belarus, where all of them but 2 are bankrupt and they're being kept alive artificially, and they're in the state of disrepair and catastrophic state of disrepair. And so that enterprise where she works, Gomel Selmash, in Gomel, it's also on the verge of bankruptcy. She says it is sort of like borderline. But she also wanted to stress that with all that said, she and her organization, they do not support the neoliberals and their agenda who are trying to get into power, and they are fighting and will continue fighting for the socialist agenda, for socially orientated politics in the country. Yeah, that's...
Thank you very much, Valentina. I'm sure we'll continue this discussion with the questions. There seems to be a lot of people interested in what's happening on the ground and the on-the-ground organizing that's happening in the trade unions. Personally, I'm very heartened to see that both of our workers' representatives are actually women, which I don't know how representative that is, but it's great and to me very significant anyway. To see, so we might touch on the feminist perspective of what's going on, but we are first going to hear from our last speaker, Denis Pilash from Socialny Ruch, which is a left-wing party in Ukraine. The name, I think, translates as social. Yeah. So thank you, Denis, and looking forward to the discussion afterwards.
Thank you all for having this meeting. And first of all, as a person not from Belarus, but rather from Ukraine, I would like to send our solidarity to the struggling people of Belarus, especially the working classes of this country. And of course, it's a great relief and happiness to see Pavel, who was also kept in detention of the regime, and to hear that thousands of people were released. However, we see now that the regime is still going on new crackdowns, and that people are going missing, and that this crackdown is especially targeted against labor activists. And what's also important, well, in Ukraine, we our group social movement, it has this aim to establish a new left party from the below, linking together working class activists, activists from trade unions, mostly from Confederation of Free Trade Unions, but also from more militant sections of the Federation of Trade Unions, and also from other social movements, in order to provide a democratic socialist alternative to the neoliberal capitalist order that's dominating throughout Eastern Europe. And I must say that no country in Eastern Europe is an exception. Belarus is also a completely capitalist state. You don't need to be delusioned by maybe that there is the state property there is maybe like in France under de Gaulle, but it's also has one of the most really harsh anti-labor legislations. And in terms of trade union rights and labor rights in general, already in the 1990s, there was a previous labor code that was also very neoliberal, that introduced this system of short-term, limited-term contracts that now covers more than 90% of the workforce in Belarus. And also that Lukashenko actually started his more than 2.5 decade long reign with suppression of independent labor movement, because Belarusian labor movement was the same strong as in some parts of Ukraine and Russia at the time of collapse of the Soviet Union. And for instance, there is really heroic history in Solihorsk and other Belarusian cities and towns of the struggles in the early 1990s. And one of the first things that Lukashenko did was a suppression of strike by transportation workers in Minsk metro. And actually, already at that point, the new rules that were introduced, they in many aspects they were pretty much like what, say, the IMF imposed on Greece and a number of states in terms of the liberalization of labor relations. So if you are a worker in Belarus, contrary to the this myth of social state, you are actually in real servitude, as Pavel said, notwithstanding who is your boss. Is it a state-run or private-run enterprise? So this myth is really widespread, as I see, not just in post-Soviet space, but also in like outside world, in Western world as well. The only distinction probably between Belarus and other post-Soviet states is that it hadn't such very swift shock therapy, but still it introduced a completely neoliberal framework for regulation of labor relations. And all this state property is also being administered not in the interests of the working classes, but in the interests of the bureaucrat bourgeoisie, close to Lukashenko. And actually, there are some estimates that the number of billionaires in Belarus is like 6 or 7. That's more or less like in Ukraine. That is a really a very prominent example of oligarchic capitalism. And what's also important, and what I would share as a person who works with Ukrainian labor movement and within the Ukrainian labor movement, to share our experience probably with our struggles and our failures in the past, because even during the Maidan protests in several industrial cities like Kryvyi Rih or Dnipropetrovsk, now Dnipro, the core of the protests was actually grounded based in the independent trade unions. However, they got no media coverage. However, their agenda was never heard and seen on a national level. And everything that was presented like officially was either this liberal Euro-enthusiastic, this picture of Euromaidan, or far-right nationalist. Though at the ground level, well, we distributed like thousands of leaflets with a social agenda. What we propose to change not just the increasingly authoritarian rule of Yanukovych, but also to really change the system, switch from oligarchic capitalism to a democratic socialist direction. And they were really supported by ordinary people who had all this anger against the oligarchic capitalist system. However, it was never articulated officially. And however, the labor had no representation in this like official opposition scenes and their bodies. So it meant that we changed the face on the top, but we didn't change the system, the root of all these problems that caused the people's discontent. And what I see in Belarus is really outstanding in many cases, because we saw the power of the working movement. Even after decades of suppression, when independent unions were really suppressed and persecuted, and when even the official unions were at some points like torn down by the state, that there is a spontaneous activity in different forms. And what Lisa was describing, this all the difficulties with starting an official strike. We do have the same. We like recently we tried to start an official strike in one of the biggest factories in Ukraine, ArcelorMittal Kryvyi Rih, and we saw so many obstacles, and it was eventually suppressed legally by a court decision. So you need to find like other ways, like work to rule strike, like so-called Italian strike, and so on, and other different forms of showing your discontent or maybe stopping the work of the enterprise. But it really it was felt that the authorities were well, really afraid by this powerful movement of workers, because this first like so-called I wouldn't say that were real some real concessions to the protest movement, but still people were released, in the majority of detained, and there were no big brutal crackdowns on further protests in at least in Minsk. It was really won by this workers' activity. And also there are huge differences between different situations in every country. So there is like this popular again notion in many Stalinist tanky circles about like this, everything is color revolution. Everything that happens somewhere is somehow directed by, I don't know, George Soros, CIA, Democratic Party, and so on. But actually, each case has its own reasons, and each case has its own manifestations. So the situation in Ukraine protests, in Maidan protests, were quite different from situation in say, Armenian protests. And in Belarus, it's again, a completely separate case. And for instance, in Belarus, we also see that there is no strong far right, like in Ukraine and in many Central European countries. In Belarus, also see that this really a protest that at the ground level defied any kind of opposition. This old opposition that was discredited, mostly right of center parties. So it's really an opportunity to try and build on the working class movement, labor movement as an independent pole, opposed to all these neoliberal transformations that they will be run both either by Lukashenko if he continues, but it also will mean more brutal and more authoritarian persecutions and less space for any kind of independent activity, of course. Or in case when some form of neoliberal opposition comes in power and still pursues the same goals. So it's really important to promote the agenda, the social agenda, socially oriented agenda that will guarantee the rights and the interests of the vast majority of Belarusians, of the working classes in the country. Of course, it's quite difficult, and well, there are also these notions and some news about different initiatives that try to do this, but actually from what I know, they are not so strong and they are not so widespread among like ordinary factory workers or workers in other sections. But still, what we see now is that there is another example how powerful and how effective even a spontaneous outburst of working class activity can be for the ruling classes. So the situation is anyway, in any case, it's quite, it has a lot of risks, but from all our hearts here in Ukraine, we wish all the best to our comrades, our brothers and sisters in Belarusian trade union and leftist movements. So we hope that there will be another alternative and there will be some way out of this vicious circle when you need to choose sides. Either you are for a brutal authoritarian dictator who actually transformed his country to a kind of monarchy, or you just support everything enthusiastically that is said by Western neoliberal institutions, and that you see no doubt in the industrialization, for say, or mass privatizations and so on. So really, this opportunity and this wish, this hope is shared by us as well.
Thank you very much, Denis. And yes, we echo your words. I'm sure all of us here that have gathered, and many more who will be watching and who are watching the events unfold, are united in sending support and solidarity. I guess the question that I would like to ask, and feel free to not address it first, but it keeps coming up on the chat as well, is what more can we do? What can the left do across Europe, in the UK, both in terms of organized trade union support, but also in general, what more can we do to put pressure, and how effective would that be? External pressure, I suppose. But we have 2 hands raised already of people who want to ask questions. So I'm going to go to David Blackman first, who has a question.
Just can you now hear me? I've unmuted.
Yep. We can hear you, David. Go
Большое
on.
вам спасибо. Thank you very much to our comrades in Belarus. And we have to notice that we must say, do we say Belarusian to avoid the word Russian? Just it's a question of pronunciation. We take the point, you've got to be very careful that we're dealing with Belarus. I'd just like to say, I think there was a loaded question from one of the British comrades, as if we had to accept that joining NATO, joining the EU, and accepting capitalism were all essentials. Please don't fall for that propaganda. You have the right to decide for yourself. I put a question up, but I'm not sure whether it was registered, that the woman leader who's now in Lithuania is reported by TASS, the Telegrafное Agentство Sovietskого Soyuza, still there, a relic of the old days. And this is Russian propaganda, or is it true that she has said that if there are new presidential elections, she would not stand? Is this just Russian propaganda, or is this something that you're also learning? And what do you think about that?
Thank you, David. Thanks a lot for your question. And I suppose, yeah, if you can say a few words about the opposition candidate as well, in terms of whether her agenda is kind of aligned with this more social development and the social agenda that workers in their strike and in their demands are putting forward, but also what's the latest developments with her situation. Should we do the same order in which we spoke?
Okay, I was the first, right? Yeah, it's true that Svetlana Tikhanovskaya is in Lithuania at the moment. I'm not sure whether she will run for a president if the elections, if new elections ever take place in the country. I don't follow what is going on with her. I have no time for that. I'm sorry. Maybe Pavel will answer.
Well, can you hear me? Well, Yulia, please translate the question because it is difficult for me to understand.
Первое спросили, лучше ли говорить Беларусь или Белоруссия по-английски. Это лингвистическое уточнение. А второе спросили за Тихановскую. Правда ли это, что вот ТАСС российский говорит, что ну, она в Литве, и что если будут перевыборы, она не собирается баллотироваться. Правда это или это пропаганда русская?
Значит, по первому вопросу, я его приблизительно понял, но связь была достаточно плохая. Однозначно лучше всего говорить Беларусь, так как это и общепринятое название, и официальное. Это первый момент. Что касается Светланы Тихановской, то вчера она дала пресс-конференцию, где сказала, что она вернется в Беларусь в том случае, если будет чувствовать, что ее возвращение в Беларусь безопасно для нее и для ее семьи. Что касается ее участия в новых выборах, то она заявила, что этот вопрос на данный момент является открытым, и главным пунктом является, собственно, добиться этих новых выборов.
Right. So Pavel says that first of all, in terms of Belarus, Belarusia, it's the official name is Belarus, so it has to be Belarus. That's how you call it. And the second thing is that it's correct that Tikhanovskaya is abroad, and that she said that she will come back to Belarus when and if it is safe for her and for her family. She has kids, so that is important. As for the elections, she said that it's an open question and that the main point now, the main item on the agenda now is to get the recognition, the acceptance that there will be the next election. So this is the victory point. We need to get to the point where there is a revote. Denise?
Well, I can only add that really, even at these elections, Tikhanovskaya was like the only real opposition candidate due to the others being barred. So she was really seen as somebody who is more like technical candidate in order to then run really free elections. Though I must say that some of these like more real candidates, like Babarika, who is a former banker or actual banker from the Belarusian section of Gazprom, they seem more like hazardous to me. So Tikhanovskaya was really more humane and somebody more I could relate with.
Thanks, Dennis, for that clarification. I'm gonna so we have two more questions, two hands up. So I'm gonna let Matthew and Andy ask their questions first, and then you guys can answer both, because I think that might speed things up. Matthew.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
So my question is mainly at the moment now to Lizaveta. It was, I read, there are various sources of information I read on the state news, so-called news agency Belta, that strikers, they don't only forfeit their pay when we're on strike, which is normal, but strikers forfeit their social rights under Belarusian law. Can you tell us what that means? Does that mean they lose their right to healthcare or to housing? What does this legally mean, and has it meant anything in the practice so far? Has this been carried through? And the other question would be, Dennis has already answered it very clearly, but due to some of the comments people have been posting, some people still seem to think, or many people think, that state ownership of most of the economy means some kind of socialist or pro-worker state. The bourgeois media also, like I live in Germany and in Britain as well, they portray Belarus as communist, and the protests against communism to a certain level. But what do you say to these people who think Belarus isn't capitalist? And particularly if these people think they're on the left, how would you explain this to them briefly?
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks a lot for that question. And actually, I noted down your earlier question about the social rights, because I also thought that was quite interesting and not very clear. We're gonna hear Andy's question, and then you can answer together. Andy Force.
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much for all your contributions. It's been really interesting and quite inspiring. I wanted to ask a question that kind of followed on from something that Pavel said about the attitude of Stalinists in Belarus when they're claiming that now is not the right time to call for democratic reforms. I just wanted to ask for a bit of an elaboration on that. So maybe a bit of information about what is the strength of the Stalinist or authoritarian left in Belarus, and what is their view of the regime? Are they kind of broadly sympathetic to the regime? Or they, how are they supporters of it? Are they critical supporters of the regime? I'd just like to understand a bit more about the relationship between the authoritarian left, Stalinism, and Lukashenko, and what the tensions there might be.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, I have a couple more hands, but I think we should probably answer these first, and then I'm going to do a final round of questions. Lisa, do you want to answer?
Yes. Thank you, Matthew and Andy, for your questions. It's rather hard to answer the first two questions. Well, I should tell you the position of the Belarusian Independent Trade Union on the state and on capitalism as well. The independent unions will always be on the side of workers, no matter what rule is in the country, whether it is a democratic rule or it's a dictatorship like it is now. What we call the regime now is a state capitalism. I can assure that Pavel and Denise are right describing this regime this way. I don't know which capitalist is worse, a kind of democratic one or a dictator. Looks to me that first we have to overcome this dictatorship, and then we have to come back to the agenda of workers' rights, benefits. Oh, my ribbon is gone. Sorry. Yeah, the symbol of of our movement is now this white ribbon. About the benefits that the workers could lose while being on strike. Actually, not a real strike started on any 55 enterprises, I can say. That it's like a preparation to strikes. It's kind of protest actions, but it's not a real strike. At least those huge giant enterprises that my union is present in, they are not stopped yet. So I can't say that workers already lost some benefits, or if they go on strike, they wouldn't be let see a doctor or would need to pay for the visit to a doctor. Maybe I got your question incorrectly. The second one about the benefits that workers might lose while participating in strikes. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more into this question, or put it in different words. Maybe I didn't understand the question.
Sorry, Liz, I think this was something that Matthew had read in the official state media, that workers will be forfeiting social rights. And I think he was just wondering whether that means something specific in practice, or if it means that they will just be subject to, I don't know, police repression, for example, because, you know, being arrested, being denied your freedom is in a way losing rights, isn't it? But I think it was more prompted by something that he had read. So if this is not something you've experienced, then
not yet. Maybe not yet, or I don't know about this. And about Stalinists, I have no bloody idea. I mean, sorry.
No, that's okay. Pavel, did you? Sorry, did you want to say something more about this kind of relationship between authoritarian left and the regime?
Well,
Перевести или вы поняли вопрос?
I will try to tell about this case with authoritarian left and its relationships with regime. If I will need a translation, I will ask you. Well, the problem is that we have, I think, two tendencies in authoritarian left. The first one is the official Communist Party, which have seats in parliament, and they openly support regime and all decisions of Lukashenko. Well, also they are voting even for antisocial and neoliberal decisions of the government. So this is official Communist Party, which supports regime. The part of the Stalinists is small organizations which don't support Lukashenko openly, but usually they are saying that you don't need to fight for democratic elections, for human rights, because you will bring neoliberals. Well, at first we have to build a real, true, very Marxist communist organizations, and then, of course, we will fight regime and achieve new socialist revolution. But the problem of this second part of Stalinist is that there is no Юлия, извините, нужен перевод.
Окей, говорите.
Да, значит, проблема вот этой второй группы сталинистов, которые вроде бы открыто не поддерживают Лукашенко и говорят, что вот сейчас пока демократические выборы не нужны и бороться за права человека не нужно. Их проблема в том, что они уже много раз отворачивались от людей, и в будущем им просто никто не поверит. Это первое. А во-вторых, ну, не существует в мире таких часов, которые покажут, когда бороться пора, а когда еще не пора.
Отличная формулировка. They're saying that the problem with the second category of Stalinists who are against Lukashenko, but at the same time they're saying that they're not supporting the democratic elections or human rights, and they're saying that this is not something that we should be fighting for right now, at the very least, is that you know, that we can fight for these things later. The thing is that these organizations have already shown in their actions that there were many times when they have turned away and turned on people, turned away from supporting people and their human rights and other forms of rights. So it is unclear, it is clear that they cannot be trusted, and it's unclear whether anybody will ever trust them. And then there is another problem, is that, well, there is no such magic clock that will tell us, or can ever tell us, when is the right time to fight for democracy and when is the right time to fight for all these various rights. So this is not something that, you know, that can possibly happen.
Thanks, Pavel, and thanks, Julia. Denis, did you want to add something?
I can just add that that so-called Communist Party, it actually split in the 90s from the current Pavel's party in order to cooperate with the regime. And now what I know about them, that they are, I'm not sure whether they do anything at all. So they are just one of the decorations used by the authorities, because Lukashenko, in contrast with many other authoritarian regimes, he doesn't have like a proper, like, big ruling party. He relies like on a completely like non-party, non-ideological parliament that doesn't function as parliament, because parliamentarism was suppressed in the 90s. Well, he has such small like parts of the apparatus like this so-called Communist Party, and with the second tendency, it's something that can be seen even in more like militant and like really active in real struggles Stalinist groups, like starting with the Communist Party of Greece, that says, okay, we'll do the most I don't know, ideal socialist revolution sometime in the future. And now this struggle is petit bourgeois, and this struggle is not really proletarian, and this is not the time, and here we see this and this, and anarchists, we don't support them, and so on. So it's really this notion of the magical clock. We are waiting for some magical moment when everything is ready for a real socialist revolution, and till that we will really do nothing. And of course, I think that's a part of this, though not for all of these people, because I hope that genuinely lots of them aren't really in this trend of Stalinism, but it's some kind of contempt towards democratic rights and democratic elections as well. So maybe they even feel some more proximity to a single leader, like personal dictatorship.
Thanks, Denis, and thanks all the participants for your comments. I wanted to throw in one question which came from the chat earlier, which I think is kind of important to refocus us back on this. So this was the question from Sumaya Zadeh. There are strikes and there are street protests. what more is needed to force out the government? What can happen now? So that was Sumaya's question. I'm also going to let Levante and Christopher ask their questions, and that's kind of our final round of questions for now. Levante, you are unmuted, so you can ask your question.
Hey, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Oh, good, good. Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you all for taking part in this meeting. I wanted to ask about Nikolai Zimin. Has there been any news from him? He's the former chairman of the Belarusian Independent Trade Union. Has he been released from prison? What do we know about him? That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Levante. And oh, I lost Chris. Where is Chris? Chris.
Hi, comrades. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. I wonder maybe if Yulia would translate, please. Solidarity and thank you to all the speakers. I wanted to ask a question about where this process might go in terms of the regime. And so I'd like to ask, what is the social composition, the social base of Lukashenko, and what is the prospect of a split developing in the ruling class in Belarus? And if there is a split, is there a prospect that a section of the elite would remove Lukashenko and make a deal with the opposition? And my second question really is then, is the position of the opposition, which the official opposition, which remains for privatization, does this position prevent a split taking place in the base of the regime? Also, what it was said earlier by Lisa that there was a difficulty establishing coordination. What is the problem? What is the barrier to greater coordination amongst the workers' protests? And is there any initiative to combine the different centers of protest into a unified coordination body, which could then have a social agenda? I'm saying this because from listening to what Denise said about the difficulties in Ukraine during Maidan, that the workers had no independent coordination of the social agenda. There was lots of participation and ideas and going forward, but no strong coordination. And I'd like to see that opportunity developed, obviously, in Belarus.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Крис попросил меня перевести. Все поняли или перевести? Перевести? Павел, я вас не слышу, да? Хорошо, я переведу. Значит, начал с выражения солидарности и благодарности за ту работу, которую вы делаете, солидарность с вами. Ему интересно направление, на ваш взгляд, в каком направлении будут развиваться протесты. Его интересует социальная составляющая, социальная композиция, состав базы поддержки Лукашенко, кто его поддерживает. Также его интересует вот этот правящий класс в Беларуси. Есть ли какие-то проспекты деления и раскола этого правящего класса? И из этого возникают еще два вопроса для него. То есть, есть ли какая-то из этих секций правящего класса, сможет ли она, допустим, убрать Лукашенко и вместо него занять его место, то есть, опять же, стать, это вот неолиберальная политика, но вот такая-то секция этого правящего класса. И второй вопрос, это какую позицию может принять оппозиционные силы, включая вас, для того, чтобы предотвратить этот раскол и предотвратить занятие власти вот этим каким-то олигархатом в каком-то плане. Еще его интересуют вопросы координации протестов, то есть вы об этом говорили, и другие говорили спикеры, что есть много барьеров для координации протестов. Какие это барьеры, как их можно убрать, и какие шансы, какие, на ваш взгляд, шансы есть на формирование скоординированного рабочего движения в Беларуси и какого-то органа, который бы занимался этой координацией?
Well, who will answer? Maybe.
Yeah, go on, Pavel.
Юлия, снова попрошу вас перевести.
Конечно же.
Да, благодарю. Значит, что касается раскола в правящем классе и социальной базы. Лукашенко — это такой классический постсоветский Бонапарт, который пытался лавировать между всеми социальными группами. Собственно, это пример не единичный. Капитализм очень часто призывает такого Бонапарта, когда правящий класс в себе не уверен. То есть Лукашенко пытался лавировать и между рабочими, и сельским населением, и людей, которые живут за счет государственных пособий и пенсий, и пытался угождать всем одновременно, в том числе и буржуазии.
Значит, насчет раскола правящего класса и социальной базы Лукашенко. Павел называет Лукашенко таким себе...
Yulia, I think, can you do that bit in English, please?
Sorry?
Can you do that bit in English?
Oh God, am I doing it in Russian?
Yes.
Russian.
Oh my God, I'm out.
Don't worry.
Excuse me. Yeah, so as for the split in... Excuse me. As for the split in the ruling class and the social base of Lukashenko. So Pavel is calling Lukashenko as this kind of a sort of a post-Soviet Bonaparte. So he was trying to successfully maneuver and flirt with various social groups that included the ruling class and the ruling bloc and the industrial workers and local bourgeoisie as well, which is also quite standard behavior when ruling bloc finds itself on shaky ground, doesn't have solid support.
We had a bit of a trouble with the sound there. I'm not really sure whether that was just me actually or everyone had that. But
sound from me or sound from Pavel?
It was your bit, Yulia.
Shall I repeat?
Yes, if you can.
Certainly. So regarding the split in the ruling bloc and the social base of Lukashenko, Pavel is calling Lukashenko a sort of a post-Soviet Bonaparte who has been trying to maneuver the social space between various social groups, flirt with them and get them all on board. Which is something that is actually quite common when the ruling bloc is on a shaky ground, doesn't have a solid support base. So he's been trying to appeal to the peasants and people of agrarian complex and the bourgeoisie and industrial workers. He's been trying to kind of be everywhere and appeal and present himself as the representative and of everybody's interest. Павел, продолжайте, пожалуйста.
Да, значит, проблема всех подобных режимов в том, что в один прекрасный момент им приходится делать выбор, на чьей стороне они окажутся. Собственно, Лукашенко пытаясь в свое время быть удобным для всех, перестал быть удобным практически для всех. То есть, когда говорят, что у него 3% поддержки, отчасти это действительно так, потому что сейчас мы видим, что после выборов, которые с беспрецедентными фальсификациями, после протестов, которых вообще никогда не было вот в таком масштабе в истории Беларуси, он фактически удерживается только благодаря силовикам и узкой группе чиновников. И мы уже можем видеть эрозию, собственно, его бюрократической вертикали, хотя полноценного раскола в элитах, к сожалению, пока нет.
I guess it's my time to talk, right?
I think
the
Julia was going to translate
yeah,
that
so the ruling bloc, the bloc of around Lukashenko, they've been trying to act as if to present themselves as if they are on everybody's side, and by that, they're not useful for anybody anymore. Like, you know, they became they're not representing anyone by that. By this kind of trying to be everyone's man, they're representing no one, and many in the ruling bloc see Lukashenko now as an inconvenience of sorts. We are now see so there are some conversations and statistics that or data that there is only up to 3% support of for Lukashenko, but that's contested. The country now, so what his support is and what isn't is kind of, we have the telltale in the streets where Belarus is witnessing the largest protest in its recorded in its recent history. Right, and so the only way that Lukashenko is staying in power is by support of security forces, secret police, the army. It is not through popular support, and so it is clear and evident that this kind of the bureaucratic vertical. This is kind of direct word-for-word translation from Pavel. The vertical of bureaucracy is eroding. The support of Lukashenko regime is eroding. However, which way it will go, it is still to see. Будете продолжать?
Thanks very much for that, Yulia and Pavel. I think Lisa wanted to come in on that, and also I think there was Levante's question about Nikolai and some of the other arrestees.
Okay, let me finish with this third question asked by Christopher. What is preventing the workers' movement from forming national striking coordination? I think that the fact that each strike committee and workers' collective is so occupied with what is going on their workplace, and we are distracted by the police, by the employer, by the state, by everyone, all those evil forces, kind of, right? And we don't have time to engage in coordination with this National Coordination Council, with those poets and musicians, kind of. And it looks like they want us to break this regime with our own hands, and then they will do something for us. Yeah, it's true, you noticed it correctly. But at the same time, we are putting forward our demands, our social, our workers' demands are not only to overthrow the regime and to punish all those who beaten us, but also one of the demands is to abolish this short-term contract system, for example. So you're not right saying that we are not putting forward our workers' demands. They are included in the striking committee's demands to the employer and to the state. I think that they can't prevent us from forming this National Strike Committee, and the Congress of Democratic Trade Unions and the independent unions which form this Congress already provided this structure that we can use. We just need to send our representatives to this structure, and then the coordination will start. And I hope that after some rest during the weekend, we can start anew. Coming back to the question, street and strikes, what more can be done? I was telling you that we are thinking about clever strikes. We need to stop financing the dictatorship by different methods. And we are already implementing those clever strikes, like using the support and solidarity provided by global union federations, like the International Union of Food Workers, Industrial Global Union, the ITUC, International Trade Union Confederation, and European Trade Union Confederation. On our a request, they started an online international solidarity campaign. I've noticed that some of you have already written about it in this chat. It was launched today, and it is getting more and more support from unionists from all over the world. It's an easy thing to do. Just spend some seconds of your life and to put some pressure on our government. I'm sure that if they're busy reading your messages, it will be easier for us to have this time for struggle. We also can make those clever strikes using the supply chains of our companies who sell goods or sell I will find other words, many multinational companies are supplied with raw materials from Belarus. Like at the moment, we have an organized group of Belarusians in Oslo, in Norway, who demonstrate at the headquarters of a huge international fertilizer company called Yara International. The main supplier of potash for this international company is Belarus Kali, where the strike committee members disappear from time to time. Recently, yesterday, the other day, and the day before yesterday. So we're trying to put pressure on the employers who are state-owned employers, kind of, through the supply chains that they are part of. It's also a clever strike. Like they will receive a letter from Norway saying that their contract is under threat, for example. So that would possibly bring to a stop of financing the dictatorship. So I am asking you to find opportunities to put pressure on those companies who care about democracy and workers' rights, and who get supply from Belarusian enterprises where strike members are under pressure, for example. About Mikhail Eisen. Mikhail Eisen used to be the chairperson of Belarusian Independent Trade Union of Miners and Chemical Workers, my union. I used to work with him for 8 years. He's a great old miner, a really cool guy, the one who protests all the time. He has been taken to prison on the 9th of August when he was in the street with his comrades, just waiting for the results of elections. And he's been grabbed by the police, brutally beaten in the car, and brought to police station of Soligorsk, and later to Lubany. We couldn't find him because there were so many arrests, even in Soligorsk, which has 100,000 inhabitants. It was everywhere. So when I got to know that he was arrested, I was also surprised to know that he received the highest punishment compared to what other people, younger people, received after arrest. Normally, young people would get 5 to 10 days of detention, and he got 25. So I couldn't understand what he had done. And my union believes that it was done on purpose for all the strikes and protest marches he had organized during his struggle life. Okay, we found out that the place where he was staying, and only after the neighbors in his cell were released. And they told us that he was in a very poor condition, that he couldn't move because he's an old miner, you know, a guy after 65 who had worked in a mine underground on his knees, sometimes in humid conditions. He has problems with spine, with his knees, with blood, with heart, with all this, all health problems that old miners face. We immediately started to find a solution how to get him out from the prison. And we've been told by our comrades from Global Union Federations that there is a special procedure by the International Labour Organization that the General Secretary, the General Director can directly address the government and save a union leader who is in prison. So the Congress of Democratic Trade Unions used all its connections, and we saw him free in a couple of hours after we started the procedure, actually. Yeah, so he has joined the protest in Soligorsk immediately as soon as the strike committee started to publicly have meetings in the streets in Soligorsk. He was always on stage with our flag. So thank you very much for those who helped save him, because it is so unfair that such a honorable unionist was behind the bars and suffered a lot. I'm so happy that he's free, actually. So thank you for helping. And what else? Okay, I guess I answered all 3 questions.
Yes,
I don't know how to answer the
Lisa.
question with elites. Yeah, no, I can't answer this.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And that sounded like a very dramatic situation, but also I think illustrates that when you're dealing with an undemocratic regime, they don't care about age, they don't care about your your achievements, how long you've worked for an employer, or whatever your contributions have been. They can do whatever they want. We are running out of time, so I'm just gonna go to Dennis for any final comments on the questions or anything you want to add, really, and then we will wrap up. Once again, I want to say thanks to everyone who has joined us. Many thanks for Lisa, Pavel, Valentina, Dennis, and also Yulia for taking the time at this point when the situation is changing rapidly and you have other things that you could be focusing on. But I think it's really important to share your voices to a more international audience. And in that vein, massive thanks to our National Committee member, Chris Ford, who helped us organize this, get in touch with the speakers. We're very indebted to Chris for this opportunity. But Dennis, over to you for your final remarks.
Maybe just to continue on Chris Ford's question about what sustains the regime. I think that the first answer is just brute force. It's really relying on these security services, losing support in this Bonapartist trying to get everybody on his side, but actually alienated all the categories of society. However, I think he also did the same on the international level. He was also maneuvering between different powers, between Russia, China, and sometimes the West. And now he also relies on the support from, say, Russia. So their relations with Putin's regime were also not the most bright in recent years. However, we also see this some cracks in the ruling class as well. And I think that these new so-called new opposition figures that were these unqualified candidates for the elections, they were just like former parts of the regime, loyalists of the regime. However, still, it's not the first time when some kind of dictatorship that lost its support still managed to suppress the popular discontent. So that's why international solidarity is so important. And this, the case of Nikolai Zimin shows that when you have the support of solidarity from international trade union organizations, confederations, and international labor organization as well, how swiftly it was done. So really we need not just to be aware of the situation, but also to be ready to react very quickly in order to get results, and also to promote the information as well, because everyone needs to know that Belarus is no way a progressive or more progressive or less evil kind of regime, that it's a brutal anti-worker authoritarian regime with completely capitalist, with death penalty, that was persecuting trade unionists, anarchists, and other activists like for years. And now it's the time for this to fall, for this regime to fall.
Thank you, Dennis. I think that's a great point to end on. We have many struggles everywhere in the world, and I think the situation in Belarus is both unique and similar to struggles that we as trade unionists, as activists, as Democrats have experienced and will continue to experience. And it's important to put pressure where we can, in any way that we can. If people have, on the back of this discussion, any questions or ideas of solidarity actions that they want to join, they want to participate in, please email us at Another Europe. We will do our best to reach the speakers as well if you have anything that you want to send over to them and to pass over to them. But also we're very keen to make this not just the first and only event that we do on the situation in Belarus, but to organize some actions to show support and to work internationally in a more coordinated way to support the strikes and to support the protests in Belarus. Take care, comrades. Those of you who are going back to protests, who are going back to your committees and to your workplaces, take care, stay strong. We're very proud of you and we're very grateful that you joined us today. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.